Rugby World Rankings for the 14th of February. The Six Nations being on means there's a little bit going on in terms of the Rugby World Rankings. We'll go over those and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how fairly or not the teams are ranked. I know the World Rankings, some people don't really care. Some people, they particularly grind their gears at the rankings, and other people kind of middle of the road. But yeah, there's been a little bit going on. Obviously nothing doing with 1 and 2. Springboks are still 1, All Blacks are still 2. Those teams are enjoying, well, the South African guys have been in action, but the All Blacks guys are enjoying their summer off. And we get ready for them in action in Super Rugby in just a few days. England are back up to number 3. I've put a little green arrow for them going up because after their initial loss to Scotland, they were down, but they didn't really go up with their win over Italy. But Ireland's loss saw England kind of go back past them. So prior to the Six Nations, England were the 3rd ranked team, and they are still the 3rd ranked team now. However, their points total has dropped. They're on 86.66 now. Prior to the Six Nations, they were on 87.83. So even if their position is still what it was when they went into the Six Nations, a loss to Scotland and a win over Italy is still a negative result for England, if that makes sense. France are actually up. They're one of the few sides that have changed positions as to kind of where they were prior to the Six Nations. They are up to 4th. Some would argue they are the best looking of the Northern Hemisphere teams, but they're still ranked behind England for now. They could change that if they go on and get some Six Nations success. Prior to the Six Nations, they were 5th. They were on 85.53. Now on 86.36. Remember, the gap between these teams and Italy is generally so great that if you beat Italy, you don't really get any points from it. That's just kind of the way that goes. If the points difference between teams is too far, you don't take any points off them in the points exchange. So I've done another video about how the Rugby World Rankings work ages ago. So if you want to check that one out, feel free to do so. Ireland are down to 5th. Remember, they were up in 3rd just a week ago with their win over Wales. But yeah, it's back down for them. They were 4th coming into the Six Nations on 86.53. Now down to 86. So it's a win and a loss for them in the Six Nations thus far. The Wallabies have jumped back above Scotland, who initially passed the Wallabies when they beat England, but then they lost to Wales. So Scotland are kind of back to where they started, and Wales are just sitting there in 8th. No changes. There hasn't been any changes for Wales. They went into the Six Nations 81.56, then on 82.25. So they weren't too heavily punished for the loss away to Ireland. But they've gotten a few more points for the win over Scotland. All these teams, 9 through 16, Argentina, Japan, Fiji, Manu Samoa, Georgia, Italy, Romania, and Tonga, haven't changed in the last week. But when Georgia drew with Portugal a couple of weeks ago, if you missed that result, that was a bit of a shock in the kind of second tier of Europe. Georgia drew with Portugal, which meant Georgia dropped like one position. They were in 12th, they're now in 13th. I think they were on 73.72. Now they're on 72, so they have dropped with that kind of shock result. Italy is still there in 14th. There's been no change since the start of the Six Nations for them. Every Six Nations, when Italy loses another game and their winless streak goes on, the Georgia-Italy debate goes on, but the fact that Georgia drew with Portugal maybe puts things into a bit of perspective. I don't know. I love Georgian rugby as much as the next person and want to see them do well. I also want Tier 2 teams to have more chances to play Tier 1 teams, because at the moment it's a little bit kind of ring-fenced where top teams mainly play each other because that's where the money is, and we've seen very few teams kind of take that step up. Like, it's been a while since Italy was added to the Six Nations, and then more recently Argentina into the Rugby Championship, but yeah, it doesn't happen that often. We do risk the gap getting kind of bigger, but we've seen some good performances from Tier 2 teams. But still, I think if you chuck Georgia into the Six Nations, they're probably going to have worse results than Italy, but that's just kind of my 2 cents. Anyway, remember with the Six Nations thing, I know it always comes up, Italy's part owner of the Six Nations, so they're not going to relegate themselves. And there's a lot more money in it for the Six Nations countries to be playing Italy than to be playing Georgia. That's just kind of Yeah, how many decisions in rugby do you see based on cash? Not just rugby, but anyway. What else has been happening outside these teams on the board? Spain's in 19th, Portugal's in 20th. Remember, Romania's been doing all right. They beat Russia and Portugal. Spain beat the Netherlands and Russia. Georgia, as I said, drew with Portugal 25 each, but then they beat the Netherlands 74-10 as kind of a bounce back. So, yeah, it's not just the Six Nations going on at the moment in terms of international games. The Six Nations does take a break this week. So we kind of return to club action. As I said, Super Rugby Pacific is getting underway. Hopefully with the Fijian Drua side and the Moana Pacifica side, we will see more players getting professional level experience for countries like Tonga, Samoa, Fiji. And as I've mentioned, I would also love to see more games for teams like Georgia and Romania seem to be on a bit of a run at the moment as well. So yes, rugby remains a bit of an interesting one in terms of the Tier 1, Tier 2 balance. They haven't got things right yet, but hopefully the powers that be will find more ways to get more games between the top and the second level sides. But you guys, let me know your thoughts. Do you think England is the top ranked Northern Hemisphere team? I can't imagine there's going to be many takers for that argument at the moment, although England did beat Italy by more than France beat Italy. And England did it away. France did it at home. So maybe there's an argument to be made that Eddie Jones's side are better than we're giving them credit for. Nobody likes to give Eddie credit. But yeah, what do you guys reckon? You guys let me know your thoughts. And as always, I will talk to you guys again soon. See you later.